Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Amanda. I'm marketing manager at the Atlanta Humane Society, and I'm so grateful that all of you are tuning in to hear from our behavior specialist, Kirstin Valdes, who's here with us today. She is going to talk to us about a topic that is sort of hot in the animal world right now. Pet owners are thinking a lot about it. They're about to return to work after maybe being home with their pets for almost a whole year during quarantine. So, Kirstin, I wanted you to speak to the challenges that you expect that pet owners might face when they return to work after having been home for maybe a year long with their pets.
Definitely. So similar to the challenges that we're going to face as well. I mean, we all, including our animals, really thrive on routine for the most part. I'm sure there are people out there that don't, but for the most part, we usually find that we're less stressed and less anxious when things are predictable, when we have a routine, when there's some, reliability. So when we break this routine for our animals, it can lead to some stress. It can lead to seeing some increase in undesirable behaviors. So even just simple things like our dogs might not be getting out for walks midday anymore because we're working that full work day rather than being home to take them out. Or maybe they're just used to that constant companionship of us being in the home with them and they're not as used to being alone all of the time now. So all of that stuff, changing up their routine in that way can cause some stress and start to see some, anxious behaviors that might come out in different forms.
Definitely. So speaking of anxiety, the word that we're hearing and seeing the most often kind of tossed around, or the phrase I should say, is separation anxiety. And that's sort of how people are colloquially referring to this sort of anxiety that they're seeing their pets experience maybe when they return to work. And I think, folks are mostly referring to maybe items being chewed up, their pet vocalizing more than normal, things like that. But I wanted to give you an opportunity as a behavior professional to speak to what separation anxiety actually is, when it's okay to use that term, and what are the first steps that someone can take if they suspect their pet is actually suffering from separation anxiety.
So separation anxiety is, like you said, a really hot term right now. And for the most part, it's used whenever we're seeing behaviors like you mentioned, inappropriate urinating, chewing on items, being destructive in the home, excessive barking or whining. All of those behaviors may be found within separation anxiety, but it's really, really important that that's diagnosed by a professional. So separation anxiety can really only be diagnosed by a veterinarian, and it's generally thought of or defined as distress associated with separation from a particular person and sometimes a group. So it's generally defined as a group of emotional, behavioral, and physiological responses that vary in intensity and clinical appearance to that separation. So again, a lot of these behaviors you may see, but they might occur outside of separation anxiety. So these are all very common behaviors, but when put together and at varying levels of severity, then we start to look at it a little bit closer and go, okay, this might be something a little bit more serious and something going on with them emotionally rather than just being a behavioral issue or just a response to the stress or the anxiety of a routine change. So some of these symptoms are, like we said, urinating in inappropriate places, whining, barking, or howling, panting, pacing, attempting to escape, destructive behavior like chewing on pillows, couches, furniture, doorways, sometimes to the point of self-injury. We might have some diarrhea or vomiting when somebody leaves the house. We might see some excessive grooming, also to the point of self-injury, loss of appetite or refusal to eat, excessive greeting when somebody comes home, or even constant shadowing. So one thing you should take from me listing all of these behaviors is all of them can also have, alternative reasons. Excessive urinating in the home, you might have a urinary tract infection on your hands. That destructive chewing, it could just be a result of frustration. Maybe the animal's not getting out enough and is not having as much physical exercise as it used to, or mental enrichment as it used to while you were at home with them. So there's a lot of reasons why you might be seeing it, and it's really important to distinguish that and identify, maybe these behaviors are happening because of the change in routine. Maybe you need to add a little bit more of that physical exercise. Maybe it's time to call in a walker again. If you used to have a person that came in and walked your dog back when you had your normal schedule of going into work, that might be something that might help the dog. A big one is crate distress. So putting the animal in a crate while you're gone and hearing that barking, yowling, yelping, and seeing those anxious behaviors. I mean, if we haven't been crating our dogs throughout COVID, chances are they might not respond to it as like they would have pre-COVID, even if they were crate trained previously. If we haven't put them in that crate for about a year, they might have a different response to it. We might need to go through the process of re-crate training them.
Yeah. Well, that leads me directly into my next question then about crates specifically, because people are, they're concerned about their pet. They are probably also concerned about their furniture and the things in their home. So, probably a variety of reasons for opting to use a crate. So, is there a straight answer? Do they help? Do they hurt? Is it somewhere in the middle?
They can be a fantastic resource. I actually always recommend people crate train their dogs because you never know when the animal might need to be confined in the future. Even during vet visits, let's say, those are very stressful on the animal, and they're usually confined in a small area during those times. So it's such a powerful tool to be able to train them and get them used to that confined space without getting, even more stressed out when they're already going to be experiencing stress from being at the veterinarian and going through all those medical procedures. So I always recommend going through that training, but it's not great for every dog and you definitely need to work on it. So if your dog is showing distress while in the crate, I wouldn't be putting them in there for the time being. You should really be working on it. And you can easily Google tons of great ways to get your dog used to the crate, and you can play fun games and just gradually introduce them with just walking in and out of the crate and then spending maybe 10 seconds in the crate, making sure, you're feeding all their meals in that crate, making sure that you're gradually practicing closing the door and then opening it back up, and work your way to closing it and leaving the room. It's a whole process, and you definitely want to see that the dog is comfortable and not showing signs of anxiety throughout that entire process. In the meantime, though, for those of you that really do need to confine their dog, they're worried about furniture, and that's incredibly important, especially our younger adolescents who might get into things, ingest stuff that they really shouldn't be ingesting and could end up with a blockage. Management's pretty key. So using something like a baby gate often works a lot, especially with dogs that are under 50 pounds. So using a baby gate in a small room like a laundry room, a bathroom, things with tiled floors, really easy cleanup if your dog's still working on potty training, making sure that they have their bed and some toys to play with in there. And that can be a really great management tool without having to necessarily confine them in a crate.
Cool. That's awesome. That's super helpful. What about, I'd heard earlier in COVID when we thought things were going to be going back to normal quite a while ago, that we should practice, whether it's crate or not crate, we should practice leaving the house for shorter amounts of time if we know we're going to be returning to work. Is that something you'd recommend still?
Absolutely. We should be practicing it all through COVID, really. And especially now as a lot of us are going back. So practicing leaving, even practicing creating them while you're home. So especially if you have a 2-level home or it's pretty long enough that you can put them in a different room, it's not just a studio. Yeah. You can definitely practice that and put them in the crate and just have that going for them. Leaving the house is huge because they're not going to hear you in the other room. You can do things like play noise canceling music and do stuff like that to kind of cancel out your sounds too while you're working, if you need to create them while you're working for this practice.
Got it. That's smart. Love it. Okay, so next I wanted to talk about enrichment. We have done a couple of sessions, I think you and I earlier in COVID, about enrichment options, but specifically as it relates to the topic today, can increasing enrichment offerings in the home reduce an animal's stress or anxiety and some of those negative behaviors we were talking about?
Definitely. I mean, enrichment has been proven to reduce anxiety and stress, but along with enrichment, it is important to set up an entire routine. So whatever routine you're going to be returning to, start gradually incorporating that. Like we were saying, doing some separation, creating the dog while maybe you're working for several hours. Start to create that same routine and then supplement in that routine enrichment that you can still continue to do while you're at work. So some great more passive enrichment are things like food toys. We talk a lot about it at AHS. Mostly because also, that's one of ours. Mostly because also we can use it at the shelter. So we love them and we highly recommend them. Basically what food toys are, they're just food dispensing toys. You can do them with DIY projects at home, like cardboard boxes. You could do like toilet paper rolls. So there's great items. You could always Google it. Yep, and you can fill those with their kibble or with treats, so either one. To
My
get the animal
dog
used
saw
to
me
it.
pick this
Yeah,
up, and he's sticking
and you
his head
immediately
under the
look.
couch right now. They know all about these.
They know what it is. So that's just a great tool for incorporating some cognitive challenge into their life, for making them work for their meals even. Start out slow for the less confident dogs. Definitely don't immediately change everything over to a meal toy. Might be a little bit nerve-wracking for them. Start out by feeding them somewhat in their bowl still, but maybe putting 25% into their meal toy. But food toys aren't the end all be all, really. Those are great. Those are cognitive challenges. It lets them express some species specific behaviors like foraging, like shredding if you're doing something like a toilet paper roll. But you can also do a bunch of other stuff that can incorporate these species specific behaviors. So stuff like digging. A lot of people, if you have the space, really like to get into doing like a kiddie pool filled with sand. And the dog can dig and you can put a dry treat in there for them to find. Definitely remove the treat if they do not find it by the end of the night. You might attract some pests if not, but that's a great one to encourage them to dig. Another one is also going on, some people like to call it snifaris. So taking your dog out on a walk and not necessarily being singularly focused on going one route and not stopping. So, incorporate, have your normal walks, get that exercise in, but then maybe incorporate an additional one where your dog has some choice, where he gets to walk around and sniff and really explore the environment. That does wonders for them, and that can be a really great enrichment tactic.
What are some other, so I have my stack of supplies here. I just wanted to run through maybe a couple things that, other than the toilet paper rolls, that people can find in their own homes or easily accessible, online purchase or whatever. So yeah, maybe I'll show the item and you can talk about what to do with
Definitely, yeah,
it.
that
Okay, what
works.
about the towel?
So towels are an easy one. Everybody has a towel. Use one that you don't like so much. But what you can actually do is lay it out on the ground and sprinkle some of their kibble or treats on it. I prefer kibble with that one. And then you can actually just roll it up like a burrito, or you can actually just fold it over a little messily to cover up the food. And you can release your dog onto it to try and figure out how to get the food out of it. Obviously, if you have a dog that eats towels, do not give that to them. Try one of the other toys.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I also brought out my
Muffin tins. Those are great, and you can wash them really easily if you just want to use yours, or buy one. They're pretty cheap at Walmart. You don't need a fancy one with any rubber handles. So you can put their treats inside, and it looks like you already did that. You can just go ahead
I
and
don't
put
have
them
enough
inside.
tennis balls, but
Oh yeah. And then you can actually get tennis balls too, like she just said, and put them on top so the dog has to remove them and take them off.
My dog appeared. There you go.
You know.
Okay, so this isn't a have at home, but is an easy purchase.
Easy. I love Kongs. I would say get one for every day of the week. Why not? Have
Yeah.
them there, stock them up, and put them in the freezer so that you have them ready whenever you need them. That's a great thing to give them right before leaving the house so they're busy and they're not hyper focused on the fact that you're leaving. And it's also a great tool to get out some of that energy. So they just can go to bed afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely what I do with mine.
And I would, yeah, you can Google ways to stuff those. There's so many creative recipes online that stuff them and have certain ways to stuff them too, where you put like something sticky at the bottom and you fill the middle with a harder, crunchy food. And then you do, they've got fancy, fancy recipes that are really great and awesome. But I always recommend doing something wet in there, like a wet food, maybe unsweetened yogurt, peanut butter, anything that's wet, and then freezing it, because that definitely makes it last longer.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we do, huh? Yeah. Okay, so you already talked about the toilet paper rolls. That is all my like homemade stuff that I have, but you also mentioned boxes. Those are great.
They're pretty great. Pasta boxes. We eat a lot of pasta right now. Make sure you take out the film. Some pasta boxes do that plastic film where you can see the pasta inside. Make sure you take that out. But you can do those Amazon boxes. We're ordering so much now, so you can do that as well. Of course, I'll keep saying the disclaimer. If you're noticing that your dog is eating this stuff, it's okay if you eat a little bit of cardboard. That'll go right through. But if they're specifically really digesting a lot of it or eating the tape on the box or anything like that, just be careful and go ahead and remove it or choose a different toy.
Yeah, awesome. I think those are some great starting points. And we are going to link in the comments below to a blog on our website with some easy enrichment ideas with items you can find around your house. So take a look at that. So next, when people think of separation anxiety in their pets, I think most people's minds automatically go to dogs. However, there are probably some cat owners here watching today. And we know it's true that cats can experience separation anxiety, but I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that, what to look for.
Yeah, so my fun fact for that as well is that a lot of social species have been found to experience it. So it's not just cats, it's actually birds, horses, pigs, sheep, goats, cetaceans, primates, humans. So we all have been found to exhibit this stuff. So it's not just our dogs, not just us. Many social species actually go through this syndrome. So some common behaviors are pretty similar to the dog. So you're going to see inappropriate urinating or defecating, oftentimes on somewhere familiar, something that smells like you, like a bed or a couch. A lot of people misinterpret that defecating or urinating on the bed as something spiteful, or they're getting revenge, especially when you bring a new puppy home or bring a new cat home. That's a common complaint we'll get, that the cat went on the bed and he's mad about it. And really, that's actually just a sign of anxiety. It's in no way spite. It is truly just fear, anxiety, discomfort. You've broken the routine and the safety of what they've known. Some other stuff is going to be excessive vocalization. So lots of meowing, loud, persistent meowing, eating too fast with their food, or maybe they're just not eating at all and they stop eating. Vomiting, similarly, we might get some excessive grooming too, to the point of self-injury where they're pulling out hair or making themselves bleed. Anything like destructiveness, such as shredding curtains or furniture, knocking things over, exuberant greetings when the person returns home. But again, like we said with the dogs, a lot of this stuff might be occurring already. It doesn't necessarily mean just because your cat is doing 1, 2, 3 of these things, it means that they have separation anxiety. So definitely talk with somebody, talk with a professional. And if you're really concerned, absolutely go to your veterinarian and make sure.
Definitely. So if that is confirmed, and or if folks just sense some general anxiety maybe in their cat, what are some ways to mitigate that anxiety in our feline friends?
So just keep in mind, cats do worse in light of COVID and us going back to work and the routine changing. Cats do way worse than dogs. It takes them a lot longer to get used to a new routine. So going into this, just expect that. So just like with the dogs, start trying to mimic a similar routine to what you're going to get to, with leaving the house, with giving them time alone, do it in brief periods. A lot of people don't actually engage their cats in play, so it's an odd thing. But especially if it's a solo cat, an only child, it's really important to actually play with your cat. So at least 15 minutes 2 times per day, morning and evening, are generally the best times. But definitely, you don't want to do it right before you leave the house or right before you get back, or right when you get back, because your cat's going to be at a really heightened state. But incorporating play sessions tire them out. You're not going to be there all the time exhausting them with your presence. So you want to help them get some of that energy out and have an outlet. You can do the same thing with dogs too, with food toys. So starting giving them meal toys, you can hide them around the house too, so they actually have to work all day and run around the house hunting for their food and foraging. So that's a great way too. We have a bunch of those as well that I believe are on our blog. Am I correct? For the cats as well?
Yes.
Awesome. So similarly, you could do those toilet paper rolls. Rather than that muffin tin, I like to use ice cube trays. Those are pretty fun, and they're about the right size for the cats, and they can stick their paws in and pull out the food. So doing those is pretty great as well. Again, especially for cats, they don't do well with change. So I wouldn't put their meals directly into these toys right away. I would give them some time to get used to it. Maybe put about 25% of the meal into these toys and feed the rest however they're normally getting fed, and slowly, gradually transition them to this. And if they're really comfortable with it and they love it, go ahead and do it for all their meals. Might as well make them work. You can hide it around the house too with treats inside it instead.
Yeah. And cats really get something out of like the thrill of the chase, right? And then being able to actually
Absolutely.
like capture the thing.
Absolutely. And that's pretty fun too, incorporating that with their play. So, after playing with them, after exhausting them and letting them catch the prey, that's a great time for feeding as well.
Perfect. I love that. Um, So this last thing is maybe a little bit not exactly on topic, but I got to thinking about how people may be noticing these behaviors in their pets, and they may jump straight to frustration with the outcome of the behavior, I should say, and don't necessarily tune in as well, maybe to their animal, what their animal's trying to tell them with their behaviors. So I guess I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on how to like be a good listener to your pet. If that what I just described as you just find yourself getting home and getting so frustrated with whatever you're finding, whatever's destroyed, and how you can kind of what maybe some resources that are out there for learning how to listen to your pet better, what to be looking and listening for.
Definitely. So I love the graphics that are out there right now. There's some really great posters that illustrate stress, fear, anxiety, happiness. It kind of tells you, via body language, what the animal's actually feeling and experiencing. So Dr. Sophia Yin, she has some great graphics out there. You can just Google her name, and she's part of the Cattle Dog Publishing Company. I think is what they're called. And they have a bunch of great ones for cats and dogs. And they go through all of that. They show you body, facial, everything, tail. So those are great posters to look at, and they're completely free. Lily Chin is a great one that actually works with, she's an illustrator, and she actually works with a lot of teams nationally that are, varying from certified professionals to veterinary behaviorists. So she's got some really great graphics on her website as well, ranging from cats and dogs. And I even want to say she does guinea pigs and some other stuff with people. So she's pretty wide ranging. And she's just a great name to look up to see those posters. They're pretty great. The vetbehaviorteam.com is also a really great one. They do their own posters and show fear and anxiety and stress. Those are great posters too.
Yeah. And I think it probably goes without saying that if you can listen to your dog instead of just reacting out of frustration, and then help make whatever is upsetting them or making them anxious better because you listened and you understand that, then you may end up having more positive behaviors than negative ones if possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And especially when you start looking at it differently, you find that you have a little bit more compassion. It's a little bit easier to overcome the anger or frustration when you realize, okay, the animal's not necessarily being spiteful. It's just really, really anxious and struggling to cope.
Definitely. Well, Kirstin, do you have any final advice as it relates to separation anxiety, anxious behaviors, or enrichment?
There's a lot of tools out there. Definitely talk to your veterinarian over and over. I will say it. Talk to your veterinarian if you're really concerned. If it's, if you think it is decreasing the quality of life for your animal, or even for yourself. So talk to your veterinarian if you're really concerned, or bring in a professional trainer if you start to realize, okay, these behaviors are pretty frustrating, but I think these are just behaviors. Or your veterinarian says, yep, you just need a trainer. So bring somebody in, get that stuff solved. You're not as frustrated, because the less frustrated you are, the easier it's going to be to work with your animal. There's also a lot of great supplements out there. So things like pheromone sprays, those are really common for dogs. Adaptil. For cats, it's called Feel Away. They have been shown in some cats and in some dogs to actually increase hyperactivity and increase arousal, or even sometimes have no effect. So just keep that in mind when you use certain supplements, like pheromone sprays. They come in collars, sprays, and diffusers for the house. Keep an eye on your animal. Make sure that their stress is actually decreasing and not actually increasing. So always great to keep in mind.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kirstin. We really appreciate you being here today. I hope you all who are watching have enjoyed this, have learned something. If you have any additional questions that weren't covered here about this topic, feel free to put those in the chat below, and we will get answers for you. I will also pin some of the resources that Kirstin mentioned in the comments below as well. And thank you again, Kirstin, and everyone have a wonderful day. Bye.